Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for a webinar on how to complete the monthly reports. My name is Jessica Reynolds and I'm the Director of the Office of Downtown Development. And my goal today is to walk you through step-by-step through the process of completing the monthly reports. So what you'll see before you is our Main Street website. You can access this website by going to georgiamainstreet.org. Once you're on our website, you'll see at the top there's a bunch of different resources for you that are available. But the one thing that you really need pertaining to the monthly reports is this button up here that is highlighted and says monthly reports. To access the monthly reporting system, you will click there and you'll be redirected to our monthly reporting form. The best thing about this is that every form is generic and every community can use this. You don't need special login information. You don't need special things to get you started. All you have to do is click and go. So what I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of the form itself, show you some things, highlight and point out a few different items, and then what I'll do is walk you through the form step by step so that you can see what we're looking for in regards to each of these points. So the form is 2 pages from beginning to end, and what I will say is that it is created to highlight the economic impact of your downtown district from month to month. So this is the first page, and then the last page, it's just the complete and certify. So everything that is indicated with a little red star next to it means that it is a mandatory piece of information that we need. And then we have it broken down into several different sections. This is the beginning sections, majorly your basic information for your program, what happened that month. Second is events and volunteers. Third is job creation. Fourth is real estate sales, housing and new construction. And the last being rehab and public improvement projects. There is something in here that we use. It's called conditional logic. And what that means is that every time you answer a question, there are certain reactions based on your answers to that question. For example, with new businesses in this area, the conditional logic works in a way that if you say that you have 0 new businesses, you can immediately go on to the next question. But if you answer that you have 1 or more new businesses created, the conditional logic comes into play and shows you a follow-up question which must then be answered. We add this conditional logic feature so that way when you're completing your monthly report, if these sections don't necessarily apply to you, you can more quickly and in an expedited fashion move through the process in a more streamlined manner. So what I'm going to do is start at the very top and briefly walk you through step by step and highlight for you guys what we're looking for month to month. One of the things to know is that we're always reporting a month behind. So January's report is due in February, February's report is due in March, March and April, so on and so on. You have 30 days at the end of each month to report on the previous month. So you must turn in, March's report by April 30th. You must turn in April's report by May 30th. And that isn't a requirement to stay on task and on point for the annual assessment process. In the past, we've been flexible about these deadlines, but due to issues with turnover and people saying they're going to do it and then never doing it and having poor communities that have had impacts not being reported, we are being very strict about this moving forward. So it is required that all managers or staff members stay on top of this from month to month. And the reality is that once you find a way of tracking this for yourselves that makes sense and is easy kind of to manage and maintain, this report shouldn't take you but a few minutes every single month. So what you do when you first get here is you're going to select your community. Where are you from? Who do you represent? You're going to select the month of the report that you are reporting on currently, not the month that you're in. This is the report that you're focusing on at that moment. So if you're in April, you would select March, the person reporting. The reason this is important is because in some communities, the person who is reporting is not always the same person that is the manager. So we want to make sure if there's a different staff member that is responsible for that in your community, we are aware of who that person is. The next thing you're going to do is type in the Main Street manager's email address. The reason for this is that a copy of this will be sent to the Main Street manager, and we like to do that because even if they're not the ones completing it, we want to make sure that they're laying eyes on this report monthly and that they're able to make sure that everything is being accurately represented for their program. You're going to make sure that you indicate the appropriate region for yourself and community population. And the reason that all these filters are here in place and all these things like regions and community population and your community itself is because on the back end of the system, we can sort through these things. So when I'm looking for something specifically on Auburn, I can use that filter and find it immediately. I can go back and look at all the reports from everybody for the month of March. I can go and search by information and create statistical gauges for communities based on this population threshold. This really allows us to have more flexibility in the system and make sure that we can, provide you with the most up-to-date and current feedback. Next, did the program staff or board members participate in training this month? Yes or no? And then did your program hold a board meeting this month? Yes or no? There is no follow-up information that's needed at this moment for those two questions, but one thing that I will say is that this information should be followed up with additional resources that are included in your community's Dropbox folder. We use Dropbox as a way of making sure that we're able to share information between our programs and our office and keep that dialogue open. With any training that you or your board participates in, we want you guys to keep a training log, and that information should be kept up to date within your Dropbox folder, your community's Dropbox folder. And same with board meetings. One of the things that I will say is that we use this quite often during the annual assessment process to make sure that we have all the documentation we need. So all communities are required to give us a copy of their financial reports as well as their agendas and minutes for any board meeting that they hold throughout the year. So when we go into the annual assessments and we see that maybe October's minutes are missing, the way that we validate that you had a board meeting or didn't have a board meeting and there shouldn't be minutes there is by coming back to this monthly report and seeing what was indicated here. So let's say I'm grading your community for your annual assessment. I don't see October's minutes. That kind of is a red flag for me. I will come log into the system and see that this program indicated that no, they did not have a meeting in October, therefore there would be no minutes. It makes sense. It's logical. I can explain it. But if there is a check mark here saying, yes, we did have a meeting, then I know that there's something missing and we need to follow up with the program about it. The last part of this section is program income and program expenses. What I will say is that take a deep breath because this is not that complicated and everybody tends to overthink it. But what we want to show is that money is coming in to support the program and money is going out to pay for the program. But what I will say that most people don't always do is that they include salary and benefits and general program and administrative expenses in one area, but they don't in another. So just like a city or state has a balanced budget where they show money going in and money coming out, we want the same thing here. So, whatever your salary and normal monthly expenditures are for you and your personnel staff, travel, training, let's say that's $1,500. We want to make sure that we also show those $1,500 being spent on your program. When we get a red flag is when you say those are your normal program, that's the money that's allocated for your program, budgeted for your program each month, but it's only shown in income and it's not shown in expenditures. That to me is a red flag because I know that money is being budgeted for you, that money should be spent for you as well. There are times when these numbers will not necessarily balance out, and that's okay. If you are a membership-driven program, if you have a grant that's being, awarded to you, if you have money coming in to your program from another source, that's absolutely fine. That number over here for income might be a lot greater than the expense for that month, and vice versa. If you have a big project or something that hasn't been traditionally budgeted for that is being spent that month. One thing I will say that for programs that have are primarily municipal based, that have line items in the city budget, every year the city budgets for your program, you have X amount of dollars. The best thing to do in a situation like that where you know that your budgeting is pretty right on the money is to just take those overall numbers, divide them by 12 and make sure that number is represented here. And then anything else that goes above and beyond, you just need to add to that. Other things that I want to make sure that you include is program income and program expenses should be reflective of everything that happens downtown. So if you have a separate budget for Main Street staff, if you're a 501c3 and you've got a city budget as well as a nonprofit budget, we want to make sure we're accounting for those dollars. If you have a downtown development authority whose budget is separate from the Main Street program, we want to make sure we're accounting for those dollars. If you get hotel motel tax, we want to make sure we're accounting for those dollars. Business improvement districts, community improvement districts, tax allocation districts, all these special types of funding we want to make sure that we are accounting for and that that money is being represented as being invested into the program and spent in the district. When in doubt, use good judgment, and if you have any questions, you can always email myself or my staff at mainstreet@dca.ga.gov, and we will always be there to answer any questions that you have. When in doubt, it never hurts to ask. So the next section is events and volunteers. We obviously are organizations that do a lot of events, and we want to make sure we're tracking that. So downtown events, we want to include things that are happening by and for the program as well as by other organizations in the downtown. So let's say there's a Christmas parade, but it's not necessarily put on by the Main Street program, that can count as a downtown event. If there, is Kiwanis or Rotary Club is doing an event downtown, that's fine as well. So like I said, we're looking at a comprehensive overview of what's happening downtown. It may not necessarily be something hosted by the organization, but by a partner in the community. What I will say is that this is not designed for private events in private facilities. So if a restaurant is having a private Christmas party, that's not what we're really looking for here. We're looking for more public-based events or events in public facilities. So what you're going to do to the best of your ability is estimate how many events you had and as well as the attendance for those events. Now I will say that some events are easier to guesstimate on how many people are participating, whether that's based off of ticket sales, or you can simply do a visual head count, or there's some other way of gauging the event attendance. But sometimes when it's something like a parade or an event that somebody else is hosting, you may not have 100% accurate information, and you're going to have to guess to the best of your ability. That's okay. There's not necessarily a dollar or financial impact associated with having that event downtown. While there is an impact, we're not gauging it on a financial level. So here's just one of those opportunities. Use your best judgment. What I'm not looking for is every time your program is mentioned in a newspaper article. That's not an event to me. Every time you go to a speaking engagement, that's not an event to me. I'm talking about public events that are happening in a public manner, even if someone has to buy a ticket to go to it. Something that is open to everybody. The other thing you want to account for is volunteer hours, and that's volunteer hours for events as well as volunteer hours for meetings that take place, such as a board meeting or a downtown development authority meeting, or any committee meetings or task programs or task forces that you have that meet on a regular basis. The reason why is that volunteer hours actually do have a financial tag component with it. So volunteer hours are roughly $22.50 for an impact. I know it's quite a bit of money, and that's why we want to make sure that we are accounting for their contributions in our downtown, because the reality is that most of what we do wouldn't be possible without the help of volunteers. So we want to make sure we're tracking that progress and that impact. So how many volunteer hours did you have for your events? And when we say volunteer hours, we're looking at per person. So if you had For example, you had a board meeting, you had 7 board members there, each of them were there for 2 hours at the board meeting. That would be 14 volunteer hours overall. So we're looking at how long that one individual participated times however many people participated with each impact. Like I said, when in doubt, use your best judgment. The next section is probably one of the most important ones that we have, not because it's complex or hard to understand, but because this is really what helps sell the impact of your program. This is what people get behind and understand: job creation. So we're focusing on new businesses, businesses that are closing, as well as businesses that are expanding or relocating. So first things first, if you have 0 new businesses, you just click on, go to the next section, but you are required to put a number in each of these. So if it's 0, you just put 0. If you have 1 new business, that will generate this next question. And so the idea is that if you have a new business open, a new job is created. If you have a business close, a job is always lost, even if it's just the one individual mom and pop. I'm not looking for you to explain if it's part-time versus full-time. I'm just looking to see how overall, how many people were employed by that new business. So like I said, these numbers should always correlate. You should never have anything greater than 0 here that doesn't have a number that corresponds with it. What I will say, there are a few exceptions when it comes to expansions and businesses relocating. So programs do a really great job at measuring that impact when new businesses open, but aren't always the best at making sure that we're following up with businesses to see how they're growing and expanding. If someone's relocating to a bigger spot, obviously it makes sense that if there's one business relocating and they're moving to a new, bigger space, they would probably be hiring new people, but it's not always the case, and that's okay. Sometimes they're just relocating, but there isn't necessarily an expansion component associated with that. This is the one instance where it would be okay to have a positive number over here and a 0, number on this side. The other thing that I would say is that businesses do grow. They carry new lines. Sometimes they, develop more in their current space. And in situations like that, we want to make sure that we are taking into account the growing business itself and how many new employees they're bringing on. And that's one of those things that it's really good to check up on an annual basis and see how your businesses are growing and evolving. Real estate sales, housing, and new construction. I will say that this can be one of the most complex sections. It doesn't have to be, but the reason we've kind of simplified it this year is that not everybody uses it on a regular month-to-month basis, and so we tried to kind of streamline this process. So here we're focusing on in-town living, adding residential living units, so adding houses, townhomes, apartments, those sort of things. Buying and selling a property, as well as infill development. And infill development is referring to new construction that didn't exist prior to this monthly report. So a new building being built, a new addition in some component being added to the district. So the first one, were there any new residential living units added to the district this month? If you have no new residences, then your simple answer is no. If yes, then you have follow-up questions. The first one being, what is the total value of private investment in housing? So here you're saying, yes, we've added new housing to our downtown. I'm asking here, what is that total value? It costs money to build new housing, whether that's a single family detached, multifamily, townhome, loft condo, apartments, different things like that. There's always the financial impact of that growth and development. That's what I'm asking for here. How much was invested into that development? So if you check yes here, there is a dollar value that needs to be associated. Now, granted, if you have new residential units going in downtown, it's probably not going to cover this whole span. So you're probably not going to have new homes plus new apartments plus new townhomes plus lofts and condos. But this is so that we can see and measure across the state what type of housing is going into downtowns. So, maybe it's an apartment complex. When you're looking at something like an apartment complex or townhomes or lofts or condos where it would be multiple units, we're not asking you overall project-wise how many were created. We're asking you how many individual apartments or how many individual townhomes or how many individual lofts or condos were created. So it may be, one neighborhood, but in that new development or that new neighborhood, there might be multiple apartments, and that's usually the case. So let's say we have a new complex. It has 45 new apartments added to it, and it was a $1.5 million project. The next area, or simply no, depending on your situation. The next area, were any commercial or residential properties sold in your Main Street district this month? Yes or no? No, you click that and move on to the next section. If something was bought or sold, we want to know what's that impact. And the reason for that is that when we look at your overall private-public investment on an annual basis, this does come into play. Just because your Downtown Development Authority or your Main Street organization isn't buying or selling property, it doesn't mean that other people aren't making that investment in downtown. So we want to make sure we're capturing that information. One thing I will say is not everybody is always aware of property sales when they're happening in the immediate present. So what I will say is that, it does a lot of good to have good relationships with realtors in town. So, consider adding one as an ex officio or a board member because they always have their ear to the ground and always seem to know when everything's on the market and what it was sold for. This also comes into play with having good relationships with new and existing businesses so that people help keep you in the loop, and being able to look up that tax information, whether it's online through your tax assessor's office or having good relationships with your city or county tax assessors, so that you can see what the value was of that property that was purchased or sold. One of the other things that I will say is that sometimes you find out about this down the road or later. We can always make adjustments and changes. So if you find out that a property was sold and it was 6 months ago and you know the value of that, you can always reach out to us and we can make those adjustments as needed. New construction and infill development. Here we're talking about adding a commercial building where one didn't exist. So if something was added, you're going to indicate how many. If nothing was, then you're just going to put 0. But if we enter 1, then there is conditional logic that comes with that, and we want to know what the value was for that construction on that commercial property. Rehab and public improvement projects. When we're talking about rehabs, we're talking about private rehabilitation projects where private funds were used. Maybe you're thinking someone's renovating the facade of their building, renovating the outside. When businesses are moving in, most of the time they're investing on the interior as well, making adjustments and changes so that the property fits their needs and suits them. We want to make sure we're capturing that information. So if a building rehab took place downtown, regardless of what the kind of rehab was, we want to make sure we're accounting for that and those funds that went with it. One of the things I will say is that we don't want to double dip here. So what I mean by that is we want to make sure that things are only being represented once throughout the form in its entirety. So if you have facade grants that are being issued and you're counting that as program expenses up here, let's say you issue $10,000 worth of program expenses. When you track that as a building rehab, we want to make sure that we're taking that money out and we're not double dipping and showing those funds happening twice. I will say that with both these rehabs, public improvement projects, construction, buildings sold, businesses, all that, we're asking for that 35,000 feet level view of your downtown and what's happening economically. But everything that's reported to us, you need to be able to validate. So I would highly recommend keeping good records, keeping track of when something happens in your community, whether that's putting it on your calendar, writing it down, having an Excel document that you keep thorough track of. but the reality is that at any time, a mayor, a city manager, or city councilman may call and ask for the overall impact in your community. And I can give them this information, but you're going to have to be able to justify it. So if they see that you've reported that 2 public improvement projects happened and that their cumulative value is $150,000, you're going to need to be able to tell them what those projects were associated with. So when we talk about public improvement projects, we're actually talking about projects that benefit the greater good and was usually spent public funds to do. So beautification, streetscape, if it's a new parking lot being added with public funds, if it's private, that's a separate thing. That would be more like a private rehabilitation. Amphitheaters, water fountains, splash pads, there is a whole myriad of things that could be considered public improvement projects that public funds are being spent on. And so that's where we want to indicate that these kind of things and activities are happening. One of the other things you'll see right here, it says save and resume later. There is a save feature enabled in this monthly report, and you can save it, and what it will ask is for you to type in your email address, and it will send you a link that you can access this report at a later date. If you're one of those people that wants to work on something as they're going throughout the month, then I would highly recommend this for you. Otherwise, you would just click next. And do you need someone from the Office of Downtown Development to contact you based on the information of this report? Yes or no? We will follow up with you based off your needs. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sign it and digitally sign it, and then you would click submit form and it would be done. If you need to clear it, you can clear it and start over. You can use your mouse very easily to do this. If you're doing it from an iPad, you can use your finger. It is as simple as that. I will say that when in doubt, ask. If you're not sure, we can always walk you through this again and help you understand what it is exactly you're looking for. The reality is that this form was created as something that it can be generally used to serve all of our communities, but the reality is that everybody's a little bit different. So everybody's going to have different needs or different issues they're addressing or different things that they're reporting. So some things we just have to take on a case-by-case basis, and that's completely okay. But like I said, when in doubt, just reach out to us and ask, and that's really it. It's not super complicated. We just want to make sure that if you don't know something, you're not reporting it. I'd rather you underreport than overreport. I just want to make sure that we are being as accurate as we possibly can based off of the information that we've been given. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or any of my staff. Again, you can reach any of us at mainstreet@dca.ga.gov. If you go back to our website, we do have, where is it? Let me see. Oh, contact us. I had a little thing blocking that. You'll see our locations as well as email addresses for all of us and phone numbers for our staff, or you can send out a general email to any of us. But this is on our website. It's always accessible, and we're here to help you. So thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate you trying to learn more about the monthly reporting process.